All right, so welcome back. So today we are going to be talking about how to calculate slope if we are given a table of values. We've previously discussed how to find slope or calculate slope if we are given a graph. And today we're going to build upon that idea to talk about how to calculate slope when we are given a table of values. So we have a quick do now. Please find the slope of each of these three lines. Please try these out and resume when you're ready to check your answers. All right, if you listen to my voice, that means you have completed the do now, which means you found the slope of each line here. We have three different slopes. So let's check our work. Remember that slope is equal to the change in y divided by the change in x, and we write it as a fraction. We do not write it as an ordered pair. We do not say x equals y equals. We write it as a fraction because this is what's called the rate of change. So if you think about like miles per hour, well, that's a fraction. It's 10 miles for 1 hour, 10 miles per hour. So if we're finding the slope of each line, we need to first calculate how much we go up or down, and then how many we go to the right. If we have a positive slope, that means the line is increasing going from left to right. If we have a negative slope, that means the line is decreasing from going left to right. So if we're looking at problem number 1, I'm going to put m, because m actually stands for slope, is equal to the delta y, our change in y, over the change in x. Well, let's see how many units we go up or down. Well, I notice we go down only 1 unit, and I'm going down, so it's negative. I do not count where I start. It's like saying, hey, if I want to get from here to across the room, how many steps do I need to take? Well, I don't count where I'm starting at. I count that first step. I count that first jump. So right there as 1 unit. I'm going down, and going down on the y-axis is negative. So I have a -1. Now we calculate how many are we going to the right. Well, we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that means our slope is -1 over 5. Let's try out number 2. Well, again, m is equal to the change in y over the change in x. Well, let's see. Am I going up or down? Well, the line is increasing, so I'm going up. I go up 1, 2 units. I go up 2, and I go to the right 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I have 2 divided by 6. Well, I know that I can simplify this to be 1 over 3. So my final slope is positive 1 over 3. And you might be like, wait, but it's 2 over 6. Well, if we apply the slope of 1 over 3, you go up 1 and right 3. 1, 2, and 3. Look at that. It's right on the line, which is perfect. Meaning that every time we go up 1 unit, we go to the right 3 units. That's all it means. If we go up 2 units, we go to the right 6 units. It's the same proportionality. Now for problem number 3, again, change in y over the change in x. We want to figure out how many units are we going up or down compared to how many we go to the right. Well, if I'm reading from left to right, I see that we're going up, which is positive, which is great. So we go up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And we go to the right 1, 2, meaning that my slope is going to be positive 5 over 2, and we leave it as an improper fraction. We do not change it into a mixed number. We leave it as that improper fraction. Awesome. So let's get into our discussion today. Just now we calculated slope for given a line on a graph. But what if we're not given a line? Well, we have some steps that we can take. To calculate the slope of a line while given a table, we do the following. You should be writing this down as we go through. So if you have to pause to jot something down, by all means do that. You should be taking active notes while we are going through this. Number 1, the first thing we have to do is remember that slope is the change in y values divided by the change in x values, right? It's our change in y over our change in x. After we remember that, we then want to calculate the constant change in y values. And we're going to be talking about what that means, the constant change in y values. Then we're going to be calculating the constant change in our x values. We're then going to write our slope as a fraction, because we always write it as a fraction. And then we're going to simplify the fraction if possible. So we're going to do an example together, don't worry, but you should have these 5 steps down. We first remember that slope is the change in y over the change in x. We calculate the constant change in the y values because it should be on a consistent basis. If I'm going up 1, I should be going up 1 each time. Then we're going to calculate the constant change in x values. Again, if we're going right 3, we should be going right 3 every single time. We're going to write our slope as a fraction, and then we're going to simplify the fraction if at all possible, like we did in the do now. So let's put these words, I should say, into an example. So the first thing that we need to do is remember that slope is equal to the change in y over to the change in x. So I'm going to write that. M is equal to the change in y over the change in x. Now I'm actually going to change up some colors here. It's equal to the change in y, I'll do blue, over the change in x. So now we want to see what constant value we are changing in our y values. If we look at the table, our x row has values of 1, 4, 7, and 10. The y values have values of 8, 6, 4, and 2. We want to calculate what that constant change in the y values are, and then calculate the constant change in the x values and write it as a fraction. Well, how do we get from positive 8 to positive 6? We subtract 2. How do we get from positive 6 to positive 4? We subtract 2. Positive 4 to positive 2? We subtract 2. So our constant change that's happening, in the y values is we're subtracting 2. So our constant change in y is equal to negative 2. Now we want to calculate the constant change in x. Well, let's look at my first x value was 1. Then I go to 4. How do I get from 1 to 4? I add 3. How do I get from 4 to 7? I add 3. How do I get from 7 to 10? I add 3. So my change in x values is 3. I write it as a fraction. I have negative 2 divided by 3, and I cannot simplify. Therefore, the slope is going to be negative 2 over 3. Your paper should look exactly like this. That way you're counting how many we go up or down. Are we adding a number or are we subtracting a number? Great job. All right, I'm going to ask that you try this one out on your own. The points in the table lie on a line. Please find the slope of that line. Refer back to the example we just did and see if you can come up with those patterns. And resume when you're ready to check your answer. All right, if you listen to my voice, that means you have attempted this problem and your paper looks active. That means you have actually attempted it and not just waited for us to go over. So we want to figure out slope again is the change. Colors Q, colors M. Our slope is equal to the change in y divided by the change in x. So we want to calculate those changes. So if I look at my y values, I have 2, 5, 8, and 11. How do I get from 2 to 5? I add 3. From 5 to 8, I add 3. From 8 to 11, I add 3. Therefore, The change in y is positive 3. Now we want to look at the change in x. I go from 1 to 3, so I added 2. 3 to 5, I added 2. 5 to 7, I added 2. So the constant change in x is I'm adding 2, so it's a positive 2. We cannot simplify 3 over 2, therefore our slope is 3 divided by 2. All right, we got one more to do. Try out this one on your own again. And if you were stuck in the last one, hopefully those two examples that we have done are helping you out in attempting this example. So again, these points lie on a line. Find the slope of that line. So we want to calculate the change in y divided by the change in x. Resume when you are ready to check your answer. All right, if you listen to my voice, that means that you are ready to check your answer because you have actively worked on this problem because you want to better yourself in understanding slope. So our slope, again, is equal to the change in y over the change in x. Let's calculate that. My y value, I start at 6 and I go to 4. How did I do that? Well, I subtracted 2. To get from 4 to positive 2, I subtract 2. To get from 2 to 0, I subtract 2. Therefore, the common or the constant change in y is negative 2. I'm subtracting 2. So we write negative 2. Now we want to look at our x values. How do we get from negative 3 to negative 2? We add 1. How do we get from negative 2 to negative 1? We add 1. How do we get from negative 1 to 0? We add 1. So the constant change or the consistent change in my x values is positive 1. Now we can simplify negative 2 over 1 because this reads negative 2 divided by 1, meaning that negative 2 divided by 1 is negative 2. And we want to have our final answer as negative 2. Great job, folks. If you have any questions, please jot them below. But other than that, keep up the good work.